everybody, today we're going to be making Vicky's Essential Bag. This is a Hoop Studio project. Hoop Studio is a monthly subscription product from Me Time Delivered, a Kimberbell company. I'll link it below if you're interested in learning more about Hoop Studio or signing up. I have an unboxing video on my channel showing all the parts and pieces for this. I have everything cut, labeled, ready to go. We're going to jump right into this project. There's two options for hoop sizes, a 5x7 and an 8x12. The 8x12 will give you this bag here, the square bag. I'm going to make the 5x7 this month. I saw it on Kimberbell's preview, and it's more of a rectangle instead of a square. I have everything cut for the 5x7. Both bags are made the same way. It's just a different hoop size and different files. We have two thread colors for this project, warm gray, and that's Glide. I actually have the Glide warm gray, so I'll be using that color. And this one here, Zaffre, Z-A-F-F-R-E. I do not have that color. I pulled from my stash. It's kind of a blue-gray color. This is a Simthread. That's what I'll be using for that color. A couple items of note. It says to use only a nylon coil zipper. That's because we're probably going to be running over it with our embroidery machine. And we're going to need to watch our presser foot. Certain parts of this project, we might need to raise the presser foot. You'll also notice this symbol for matching bobbin thread color. I don't match the bobbin thread. My machine is a Baby Lock Meridian. It uses 90 weight bobbin thread. Embroidery thread is 40 weight. I don't mess around with it, and I don't have the other little bobbin case that you can drop into the machine to work with different thread weights, so I stick with my 90 weight thread. I will call this out as we work through the project in case you want to match your bobbin thread. We're going to be using a light mesh cutaway stabilizer, and it calls for a light tearaway. All I have is a medium tearaway, so I'll be using a medium tearaway today. You get full color instructions with your Hoop Studio kit. You can see 5x7, 8x12. It's the same steps. The only difference is the file size. Here's the 5x7 that I'm going to be working on today. So it's more of a rectangle, and the 8x12 is a bigger, larger square. That's the only difference. For part one, you prepare the strap tabs. This is really easy. The fabric size to cut is in your instructions. You fold it in half and then fold the raw edges to the center. Iron it and do some top stitching and then trim. It's the top stitching and trim. We've done stuff like that before. I went ahead and did that step to save us some time so we can get right to the embroidery machine. So you do the folding and the top stitching, and then you trim it to the size given in the instructions. I'm going to set these aside. We need to load some light mesh cutaway into our hoop. I'll be working with the 5x7 hoop. I'm on my last package of these pre-cuts. I don't think Kimberbell sells these anymore. I do love these, but they're 10x12, so if you have their light mesh cutaway, you can cut some 10x12. Really easy to grab. Goes perfect in the 5x7 hoop. I'm going to load that. We're going to head over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I've got my Kimberbell home sewn needle minder here. This is great. This is a big honkin' magnet. I use a metal book stand to hold everything. I'll put information on that below. This is going to help me keep track of everything so I know which step I'm on. Love it. Let's bring up our files. And I am working with the 5x7. So if you're working with the 8x12, instead of seeing a rectangle, you're going to see squares. We're going to start with the Part A embroidery file. In the instructions, it does show the square. So for 5x7, we're looking for the little rectangle right here. Bring that up and we'll hit Set and Embroidery. It states to use a visible thread for the first step. I put the warm gray on my machine. Let's get started. You should have a light mesh cutaway loaded into your hoop. We're going to stitch out the back batting placement line directly onto the stabilizer. You want to grab your back batting, cover the placement line, make sure you've got that covered completely, and I would add some tape just in case. Let's put a couple pieces of tape on it. I like to tape the top sometimes and then lift it up and double check and make sure I actually did cover everything. And then we're going to stitch the back batting tack down line. For this step, it does tell you to put the warm gray thread on your machine. You'll want to remove your tape, and I actually use my tape over and over and over again until it just doesn't stick anymore. You'd be surprised how many uses you can get out of it. And then you want to trim away any batting that's outside of that stitch line. I use 2 different pairs of scissors most of the time for the Kimberbell projects, the double curved applique and the snips. The snips are really good with trimming fabric. I usually don't trim batting with these. I'll use these for trimming batting. I've got that trimmed. If you ever accidentally cut your stabilizer, just put a piece of paper tape underneath it, press it down, keep going, you'll be fine. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the back top placement line. Grab your back top fabric. You want to make sure to cover that placement line. Use some tape, tape it in place, and then we're going to stitch out the back top tack down line, and this is all in warm gray. Make sure that's covered, and then stitch your tack down. I'm going to go ahead and pull off that piece of tape so I can use it again somewhere else. With the warm gray thread, stitch out the quilting. Once your quilting has stitched out, you want to switch to the other color. This is the one I'm using. And we're going to stitch out the strap tab placement boxes. Once those boxes have stitched, we're going to get our little tabs and our D-rings and get those placed. I'm going to take my hoop off my machine and head over to the table. We're going to be putting D-rings on the tabs. When you look at your tab, this tab, I've got a nice blue flower here, and I've got a little bit of color here, but kind of nothing in the middle. I'm going to put this around my D-ring like this, so the blue flower will show. So this one's going to go here, and we'll measure and tape them in just a minute. Let me just set that down. And let's look at my other tab. Plain, nah, didn't really get anything good with that one, did I? And then this is going to probably get caught in the seam, but we'll go with that part anyway. So we'll fold that in half. Set this aside. We're going to be placing these just past the bottom of our boxes that we just stitched out by 1/8 of an inch. I've got a ruler with 1/8 of an inch marks, and I have a Kimberbell water soluble pen from the punch needle kit. These also come in your Clear Blue Tiles Essentials set. I'm going to go ahead and just place a little mark, really tiny. I'm measuring 1/8 of an inch. Just going to put, you know, like a little tiny dot. I can see that, and I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch and put a little dot there. It doesn't say to do that in the instructions, but that's going to help me place those little strap tops. Can you see the light colored dot that I just placed? And that'll come off with just the tiniest bit of water. I did get 2 fresh pieces of tape for this. I'm going to grab one of your D-rings with the strap tab, fold it in half. Look for that 1/8 inch mark. That's going to help me line up the bottom. The raw edges are lining up with that 1/8 inch. Glad I measured that. That makes it a little bit easier. You'll see that the 1/8 of an inch extends past this stitch line. It's probably going to get tacked down, and that's why we're doing that. Place that, center, and then they show taping right here, kind of over the D-ring. Make sure it's nice and secure. I might need to get a little bit of a longer piece of tape for that. But we'll go ahead and we'll tape it. That way they're where they're supposed to be, and then I can go back and put a bigger piece of tape. So again, 1/8 of an inch past, centered, you know, side to side. So I don't have it way over to one side or way over to the other side of the box. I've got it sort of centered. Line that up, tape, they're where they're supposed to be. I'm going to get a couple bigger pieces of tape. We'll just go whole hog here and cover the whole thing. How's that? Make sure everything is really secure, get everything down, and this one I have to move because that little tiny piece of tape just wasn't big enough. So make sure you tear off a piece of tape that's big enough for your project. Getting everything right where it needs to be, and then we'll head over to the machine. One thing I'm noticing is we're taping it here, like the picture. These are just popping up. We're going to be placing another piece of fabric here at some point. I'm going to be a little bit extra cautious, and I'm going to tape the bottom part of these tabs to hold them down. If it gets caught on the inside of the seam, nobody's ever going to know it's there. I know it's going to get stitched over because we're going to go tack this down, but I don't want these popping up. They're just opening back up. You could probably iron them. That might help too. Let's just be a little cautious here. Make sure that edge is taped nice and secure. We're back at the machine. Everything is taped, and double taped. We're going to stitch the strap tab tack down. I'm going to keep my finger on the start and stop button in case the presser foot gets caught or anything goes wrong. But let's give this a try. My machine also is not at full speed. Those stitched out. This one stitched out perfectly. This one, when it started, the tab got shifted. So I know this is a little crooked. That's not going to bother me. I would say if you want to make sure that these are stitched down perfectly straight, I might just take this over to the sewing machine and just go back and forth over it. You saw it went back and forth several times, and that'll give you a little bit more control. You can kind of hold things with your hands as you stitch over it. But again, this one's perfect. This one moved a little bit, no big deal. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this extra tape. That tape came right off. I didn't even catch any of it in the stitching, so I would recommend adding that piece of tape there to hold those nice and flat. The next picture does show us adding an extra piece of tape. It says to tape the D-rings toward the top. I think that's just to keep them from bouncing around. Mine are pretty taped down. What can I say? I like my tape. This is all taped securely. We're on page 5, number 8. It states to slow down your machine, raise the presser foot 3 millimeter or higher. Mine went over all this with no problem. It's not at full speed, and I didn't mention it, but regular 7511 embroidery needle. I'm going to keep an eye on it, and again, keep my finger on that start and stop button. We're going to stitch the back bottom trimming placement line. Right there. I can see that it's caught. I'm going to make sure that this gets pushed underneath the presser foot. And we'll start it again. Slow it down before it hits that. And we're good. That worked just fine starting and stopping the machine. It tells us to remove the tape from the strap tabs. So the tape that I've got here, the big piece, but to keep the tape in place that's holding the D-rings toward the top. Here's what that looks like. The next step is to trim away this fabric right here at the bottom. We're not trimming the sides or the top, just this little piece right here. Go ahead and trim away that fabric. That's what everything looks like after I have it trimmed. I'm not worried about the extra here because our next fabric is a darker fabric. We're on number 19. You're not doing this. You're doing this. You need to center your back bottom fabric right side down along this line here with all of this extra up at the top, because what we're going to do is we're going to stitch a seam right here, and then we're going to flip that down, and that's going to be the bottom back of our bag. Here's what that looks like. I put tape on either side. The fabric is right side down, extra is up here at the top. We're going to stitch the back bottom seam. It says again to raise the presser foot. I'm going to do the same thing and just sit here with my finger on that button there and slow it down if needed. That worked just fine. Just make sure if you're doing that, if you're starting and stopping your machine doesn't know your hands are here. It will sew over your fingers. So don't get your fingers really close to your presser foot. You do not want to stitch over your finger. Let's get this tape off. Once you've removed your tape, you're going to flip it down, take it over to the iron, press it well, and then we're going to tape it here at the bottom. I went ahead and pressed that nice and flat. I've got a piece of tape along the bottom. We're going to put this back on our machine and stitch out the back bottom tack down line, and then we're going to remove the tape. I stopped my machine. Do you see what I did? I had my piece of fabric turned the wrong way. See, I've got a gap here. Let me pull the tape off. And I hate when I do stuff like this. Do you see? It hasn't gone to the bottom. When it tells us to lay things lengthwise or widthwise, a lot of times I just lay it down the wrong direction. I don't know why. So this piece of fabric was cut 6 by 7. I know myself and I know better, and I should have cut a 7-inch square. Now I have to think about what I want to do with this. I think the only thing I can do is to take this off and go ahead and cut another piece of fabric. So I need to pick out the stitches here and the stitches here, and then have a look at it and come up with a game plan. If you ever have to pick out a bunch of stitching, a lot of times it's easier to pick out bobbin stitches from the back. You pick out, you know, every 2 or 3 stitches or so, And then when you flip to the front and you go to pull out the stitches from the front, see how that just popped out real easy? I'm going to pull out all those stitches. I got that all picked out. It took me about 5 minutes. 4 of those minutes were right here at this spot. There were a lot of tack down stitches right there, and these last few stitches just did not want to rip out. Since I'm making this small bag, I went and I cut myself an oversized square. I need to back up and redo some steps. If you've never had to back up in your machine, let me show you that, and then I'll redo the steps and get us back to where we were. I'm going to hit the needle minus plus. You can go by individual stitches, tens, hundreds, thousands. The double arrows will move you a complete step. I need to go backwards. There's that little U. That's where I stopped. That's what I need. I need to take my piece of fabric and put it back on my hoop like that. Stitch that and flip it down. Before you go stitch the U stitch, make sure you're covering this. This is about 1/2 inch below the batting. That's why I didn't catch it, because the batting was covered. So when I had flipped my original piece of fabric, it landed, about there, and I thought, okay, everything's covered. So it didn't even occur to me that I had flipped it the wrong way. Once you're where you need to be, you hit okay, and now I can just put my presser foot down and keep going. I stitched that out, flipped it, pressed it. Now I can stitch my back bottom tack down line. Now I'm good. It tells you to remove the tape. I do want to show you. This is the piece that I seam ripped off. You can see that there's some holes in it. If I didn't have enough to cut another piece, which frankly I just did for convenience since I'm filming, if this was all I had, all I would do is lightly spray it with water, and then you iron it, and I kind of gently run the iron and sort of, like little circles, and all those little holes will disappear. You'll never know you seam ripped your fabric. Our next step is to stitch out the quilting. You'll notice again in the instructions it talks about raising the presser foot. That's because up here we've got these straps. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sit here and stare at it because I know I'm not going to have a problem with any of the stitching here down. That's normal stitching, normal quilting. It's just going to be up here by the straps we want to pay extra attention. I had no problem with that. I slowed it down whenever it got close to the strap. No issues. It tells us to flip our D-rings toward the bottom of the hoop and tape in place. So right now we have them taped near the top. We're going to flip them toward the bottom and tape in place. These are flipped down. It's going to stitch out what they're calling registration marks up here across the top and down across the bottom. Let's stitch those out. We're done with this part of the project. It tells us we can remove all the tape, take it out of the hoop, and to trim away the excess stabilizer. Since I'm filming, I'm just going to get it out of the hoop and we're going to move on to the next part. We're ready to move on to stitching the pocket. It tells us to fold the fabric in half widthwise, wrong sides together, and press. I'm not folding or pressing anything until we have this stitched out, so I make sure that I fold it the right way. We're going to be stitching some stuff and we'll be able to figure out which way to fold the fabric. I still have the previous design here. In case you're new to embroidery, you should have a home button. It's going to say okay to cancel, which is fine. We need to bring up the pocket design. That's this one here. It'll look square if you're doing the larger bag. Set an embroidery and we'll be ready. I went ahead and I put the warm gray back on my machine. The first step we're going to do is stitching out the pocket batting placement line. It has the little eye. It says to use a visible thread. And then as we move through, we're going to be stitching with the gray. So I might as well just use the gray. The first few steps are just like we just did. We're going to stitch the placement line, place our batting, tape it, stitch the tack down, and trim. I'll run all those steps together. Once you've got your batting tacked down and trimmed, we're going to stitch out the pocket placement line. If you don't have that warm gray on your machine, make sure you've got that loaded on your machine. Once that's stitched out, we need to head over to our table with a seam ripper. We're on number 9. We're going to be using our seam ripper and cutting along this part of the line that we just stitched, just this top angle, and it shows extending the slit. It says 1 to 2 inches on each side, and when you look at the picture, that essentially takes it from one end of the hoop to the other. I'm actually going to start partway down because you need to go all the way to the end. Let's just put my seam ripper right on that line, and I'm just cutting right on that stitch line, just to the edge of my hoop. And you can see the stitch line is pulling out as we go. That's okay. I got that a little crooked. What else is new? Just do the best you can. Okay, all the way to the edge of the hoop. This is cut all the way across one end to the other end of the hoop. We're going to be working with this pocket fabric. Remember, I didn't fold mine yet because I always fold things the wrong direction. Now I can look at this, and now it's easier for me to figure out which way to fold it. Here's the pocket fabric. See how it covers the hoop? So I know if I fold it that way, you can tell that's the wrong way because you can see your batting. So this needs to be folded like that. That's going to be the pocket. That makes sense. So I need to go ahead and press that. Got that pressed. We've got our hoop. It says to unfold the pocket fabric and lay it right side up with the crease aligned with the slit and running horizontally. Make sure it's right side out. So right side out. I'm going to open it up. I'm actually going to kind of fold it to help get it through the slit easier. There we go. Slide it through. And now we need to line up that crease. So you can see the crease where you pressed it. And what's interesting is I think my fabric might be wider than the opening. We'll see here in a minute. Here's my crease, here's my slit. We're going to put that there. Sorry, it's laundry day. Luckily there's no construction work going on at the moment. We're in a wait for inspection mode. If it's your first time watching one of my videos, I'll link the construction videos for you below. I'm reading the next step, and further down on the next step it says, if necessary, snip the fabric slightly at each end to help it lie flat. So if you've got extra, you can do a little snip on each edge. A little snip, really little. I'm going like 1/4 of an inch little. Okay, we'll put it back through. That's helpful. That makes it easier. Much better. So you can do that little snip on the edge, and that'll help it lie nice and flat. It says to tape that in place. Tape that in place. And then we're going to flip it to the back. I still have a little bit of a wad of fabric over there. I can trim this a little bit more to help it lie flat. And then we're going to tape that. You want to make sure that you've got something supporting the bottom of your hoop, whether it's your hand or you fold the towel or put a little pressing mat underneath it. Don't push down because you'll distort your stabilizer. We're going to take this over to the machine. We're going to stitch the pocket tack down line. Let's have a look at that. I didn't have this side pulled over far enough. I just barely caught the edge of the fabric. I mean, it is right on that stitch line. It's going to be okay because we're going to do quilting and then we're going to put the bag together. So I know I've got at least 1/4 of an inch here. This will get caught, but I had it pulled too far to one side. Make sure when you're sliding that fabric through, try and center it a little better. Let's flip it to the back and see if the back is okay. Same problem on the back. Do you see that? Here's the stitch line and here's my fabric. So that didn't quite get caught. I think this will be okay. Again, we're going to be putting it together. It's a bag. And when we look at this, now we're going to stitch out the quilting. This is going to be the front. The front of the hoop is the front. And the back of the hoop, where I've got this little piece, that's going to be the inside of the pocket, so nobody's going to see it anyway. I'm not worried about it. I've got tape here. It says I can remove the tape. I'm actually going to leave that tape. I'm just going to leave it there for the moment. And then on the front, it does say I can remove the tape. I've got a little tiny piece here. Just need to get it out of the way. And I'm going to just leave the tape for now. We're going to stitch the quilting. Let's stitch out the quilting. the quilting stitched out. It caught this corner. It's definitely fine on the front. We're going to stitch out the top tack down line. It's going to go across the top. The last step on the machine is to stitch out the registration marks. The next step is to remove it from your hoop, trim the excess stabilizer and fabric that's outside of the registration marks. So your registration marks are down here, and it shows you what to trim off. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. I'm going to load some light mesh cutaway into my hoop, and we're going to start on part C, which is the button flap. Let's get to part 4, stitching the button flap. You want light mesh cutaway stabilizer in your hoop and that blue-gray thread on your machine. We're going to start by stitching out a batting placement line. You'll place the batting, tape it, stitch the tack down, and trim. Once your batting is trimmed, we're going to stitch out the front button flap placement line. Grab a piece of the button flap fabric right side up. You want to cover that placement line. Go ahead and tape it in place, and then we're going to stitch a tack down line, and we're not going to trim it at this time. Next, we're going to stitch out the quilting. After it's done quilting, you can remove the tape, and then we're going to get our next piece of button flap fabric, and we're going to cover this piece so right sides together. So you've got this one that's quilted right side up, the next piece right side down. I'm going to just take some of this tape and stick it on here just in case. We'll go ahead and tape it, and then we're going to stitch the back button flap tack down line. That's it for this on the machine. Let's take this over to the table. I'm going to pull off the couple pieces of tape I have there, and you want to get this out of the hoop. I've got this up on a tissue box to get it closer to the camera. This step is a little bit confusing, but I'll explain it. We're on 13. It says to remove the project from the hoop, turn it to the back, and trim the project on the trimming line stitched in direction. Step 9, do not trim the thread knots. I went back to step 9. Here's step 9. Here's that line. It goes all the way down, around, and across the top. But since then, we've covered it up with another piece of fabric, so you can't see the line anymore from step number 9 on the front. Here's the line they want us to trim on, right there. See, there's the top there, so we're going to flip over. It's the outside line. Here's the line. We're going to trim here and then all the way around on this outside line. And it tells us not to trim any thread knots. That's going to cause the thread to unravel. I've got one here, here, and here. This knot is holding this center stitch line, so we don't want to cut that. This knot here is the quilting. That doesn't matter. So the big one to watch for is that one right here. So if you have this facing up toward you, this one you have to cut. That's the tack down for the line that we're trimming on. This one is the tack down for the quilting. It's really not going to matter if we cut it. The quilting won't come undone by the time we're putting this together. But be cautious of this knot here. That's this middle line of stitching. So I'm going to trim around that knot. Not worried about this. It's tacking that down. We're cutting on that line. Not worried about this. It's tacking down the quilting. The quilting is not going to unravel. I don't want to cut through the last knot because that's holding down the center line of stitching. So I'm just going to cut around it like that. And then the rest of the way you can cut right on those threads. I've got that all trimmed. It's still a little bit damp. It'll dry. It tells you to cut notches on the curves. Do not cut the stitches. You can see I didn't quite get the stitch line there, that outside line. That I can cut. What they don't want you to cut are these stitches right here. I'm going to grab my pinking shears and notch the curve. Instead of cutting notches, pinking shears just make notches as they go. Got everything excess trimmed away. It tells us to turn it right side out, poking the curves with the blunt tipped around press well. So you'll see you've got an opening here. This is where you want to turn it. You don't want to try and turn it at the stabilizer. You want to turn the fabric pieces right side out. This is all pressed. I'm going to set that down. We need to load, they say light tearaway stabilizer. I don't have light tearaway. I only have medium tearaway. I'm going to load that in my hoop. I've got my tearaway loaded. It tells us right here we're going to do the matching bobbin thread, top thread thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with my white thread. I explained that at the beginning. If you're wanting to match your thread, go ahead and wind a little bit of this blue-gray color on a bobbin. Let's bring up our file and we're going to stitch out the buttonhole. This one right here. I'm going to hit set and embroidery, and I have the blue-gray color on my machine. Again, if you want to match the bottom thread to the top thread, switch out the bobbin. Make sure you've got your tearaway stabilizer. We're going to stitch out our placement line. We need to place our little button flap quilted side up. You've got the side that has the quilting and the side that's plain. You want the quilted side up. Place that right between those lines, and then we're going to tape that in place. Once you've got that taped, we're going to stitch out the buttonhole. That's it for this part. Let's take it over to the table. If you changed your bobbin thread in the last step, you want to make sure you change it back to the white bobbin thread. This is the front of the flap, which you're going to see on the front of the bag. I don't see any of my bobbin thread. If you flip it to the back, you do see white thread, but that's the inside of the flap. So I'm not really concerned about that at all. We want to get this out of our hoop, and then we're going to tear away the stabilizer. Medium tearaway worked fine. If you don't have light tearaway and you have medium tearaway, heavy tearaway, if you don't have any tearaway, but you have a wash away, like a sticky back wash away, that would work too. Honestly, light mesh cutaway would probably also be fine. You would just have to sit here and cut it. Use whatever you have if you don't have the tearaway. Step number 6 is optional. They say to take a fray preventative product like this fray check, and you can put it right here where we're going to open up the buttonhole, and then you have to set it aside and let it dry. You know I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep filming. We're going to open the buttonhole. One thing I like to do is place a stop. Get a pin. I'll start here and go to the top because I can hold this piece. I'm going to put a pin right across the end of this buttonhole, and this pin's already bent, so it's perfect for it. Because we're going to use our seam ripper to open this, I can't accidentally go past the edge because it'll hit that pin. I'm going to use one of my smaller cutting mats because I'm really going to have to get in there with the seam ripper. Make sure I have that at the right spot and get in there with the seam ripper, and then I'm going to look at it from the back. That looks good. You can see where the seam ripper is. I didn't accidentally start too high up at the top. I'm right inside where the little center part is. That's a tight buttonhole. Do you see that? I've done buttonholes on sewing machines and the hole part is a little bit bigger. I'm worried about catching some of that stitching. Well, I'm the guinea pig, right? Here we go. Go ahead and put that back in. You need to be really careful. I'm actually going to grab my glasses. I think I'm going to actually do this from the back. I can see it better from the back. You can see the white stitches. Yeah, that's really tight. I'm going to see if I have a skinnier seam ripper. Alright, now I'll go from the front. Really slow. Gotta go straight or you're going to cut your stitches. Coming up on the stop pin. See? You won't go through the end. Woo! Sweating bullets! Looks good. Since we're going to move on to some other things, at this point, I actually am going to put some fray check on this, and then it can sit and just go right along where I just opened the buttonhole. I'm going to set this aside. We're going to move on to part 6, which is assembling the bag and the hoop. We need to load light mesh cutaway into our hoop. You want to grab your lining front bottom fabric, which is a rectangle. It tells us to lay it right side down. If you're doing the 8x12, you're going to fold one long edge, a 1/2 inch wrong sides together, and press. I'm doing the 5x7. So we're going to fold one short edge, a 1/2 inch over, wrong side together, press well. Okay, so pay attention to that. 8x12 hoop, folks, you're folding on the long edge. So like this has a long edge. If you're doing the 8x12, you're folding on the long edge. 5x7, we're going to fold on the short edge. This is my short edge, so short edge for 5x7. A 1/2 inch, wrong sides together, press well. I'm going to take that to the iron and press it. We also need to take our lining front top right side down. Again, it doesn't matter. If you look at this fabric, there's really no right side or wrong side. Fold one long edge, a 1/2 inch over, wrong sides together if you've got them, press well. Let's load the next file. You want the bag front file. Mine's a rectangle. If you're doing the 8x12, it's more of a square. I've got the blue-gray thread on my machine because after this first step, that's what it says to use, and it says for this step, we're going to stitch the registration marks, use a visible thread. That's a visible thread. Let's stitch out those registration marks. Next, we're going to stitch the front batting placement lines. If you're stitching the 8x12, you're going to get lines here at the top, and then the lines here at the bottom. The 5x7 design, which is what I'm stitching, is only going to stitch the bottom lines here. So again, 8x12, you'll get both of these lines. 5x7, we're going to get that. Let's stitch that out. You want to cover your placement lines with your batting. Again, you'll have a top and a bottom for the larger size. I'm doing the 5x7. Once you've got that covered with your batting, tape it in place. You're going to stitch the tack down and trim. So for 5x7, we're going to have this one piece tacked down, and then we'll trim the outside. 8x12, you'll have the same looking piece at the bottom, and then you'll have another piece at the top. There's a great picture of that on page 11, number 8. Let's stitch the tack down. I've got my batting tacked down and trimmed. If you're doing the larger bag, you're going to have the big piece of batting here and another smaller piece right up top. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the zipper placement lines. We're going to place our zipper. I'm going to do that over at the table. We want to grab our zipper, right side up. We're going to place it inside the placement line. It says with the zipper pull to the left and outside of the placement area. If you're a lefty though, and you want it to open the other way, you can place it the other direction. So I'm going to place this down. I've got my zipper pull. One thing I like to do, I want to make sure that that doesn't fall off. I don't accidentally knock it off the zipper. Just put something there to stop it. Place that, and I'm looking at the zipper placement lines. It'll fit inside the outside lines. When you stitch this out and look at it, that'll make sense. I'm going to place that. Here's my zipper pull over here. We need to tape in place as shown. So we're going to add some tape and tape. We're going to go back over to the machine and stitch the zipper tack down line. Back at the machine, let's stitch out that tack down line. No problem at all stitching over that. It tells us to remove the tape. I'm going to hold the stitching down with my thumbnail as I pull that tape off so I don't accidentally rip out the stitching. We're going to turn our hoop to the back. Inside the zipper placement area, we need to cut away the stabilizer only. That's going to expose the back of the zipper. So here's the zipper teeth. We need to see that. I need to turn this towards me. I've got my little seam ripper here. Can kind of lift this and sort of pull it away. Make sure you don't cut your zipper. Get like that right inside those stitches. I'm supporting it with my left hand at the bottom. We're going to go across. I'm going to stop before I get to the end to make sure I don't accidentally cut those stitches. I'm going to go this way. You can use scissors. I think seam ripper for this is fairly easy. Now I'm at the end. Now I will grab some scissors. Get this last little bit. Now you can see the back of your zipper. It tells you to turn it to the front, place the front top fabric right side down, aligning the long edge with the top edge of the zipper tape with the excess fabric to the bottom. Here's my front top fabric. That's going to go right side down. Align the long edge with the top edge of the zipper tape, long edge, top edge of zipper tape, the excess fabric to the bottom. Not a whole lot of excess fabric. but you can see that the fabric is a bit longer than the zipper tape. So you don't want to line it up like that with the bottom. We're lining it up with the top of the zipper tape. Center horizontally over the zipper and tape in place. I need to make sure I center this. That looks pretty centered. And let's see, there's the top of my zipper tape. It says to go ahead and tape it in place. We're going to go back to the machine and we're going to stitch the front top seam right across the top there. I think I'm actually going to tape it right there too. It kind of wants to pop up because you've got the zipper there. So make sure it's nice and flat. We're back at the machine. I had to add another piece of tape there to hold that down. We're stitching the front top seam. That's stitched out just fine. You're going to want to remove all of your tape and then take this over to your ironing board and flip it up and give it a good press. Once you've got the tape off, flip and press and then add a piece of tape across the top. We're going to put this back on our machine and we're going to stitch the front top tack down line. We're on number 18. Here's another step with something that's a little bit different depending which sides you're working with. We're going to get our front bottom fabric right side down. You align the long edge if you're doing the 8x12, the short edge for the 5x7. And you're lining it up with the bottom edge of the zipper tape. We're going to tape it in place. It says the fabric should be centered horizontally over the zipper and cover the front top fabric. This is the front top fabric. So we're going to be lining up here with the extra fabric going that direction. I need to line this up along the bottom of the zipper tape. The extra fabric's going across the top there. Center it horizontally. That looks good. And then we're going to tape that into place. We don't want that to move. And then we're going to stitch the front bottom seam. Let's go ahead, take the tape off, and you'll flip it, and you will want to take this to your ironing board and press. Yep, that's correct. See the registration marks here and the bottom of the bag, and my bottom of the fabric's going past the registration mark. So that's good. I'm going to press that, and then I'm going to add tape to the bottom. This is pressed and taped. We're going to stitch out the front and bottom tack down line. You can remove the tape. We're going to stitch out the quilting. I'm doing the 5x7, so you're only going to see it quilt the bottom part. If you're doing the 8x12, it'll quilt the bottom, and then there will be quilting at the top above the zipper. The quilting is done. I had 3 thread breaks during that. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you had any thread breaks. Let's go ahead and take the hoop off our machine. I brought over a tray table so I don't keep having to move the camera and walking over to my table and bringing it back. You can take the tape off. We're going to take our hoop and turn it to the back side. We want to get our lining front top fabric. That's the little strip of fabric in the solid blue. It says to place it right side up, aligning the folded edge with the top edge of the zipper tack down line stitched in direction step number 12. I need to go back to direction step number 12 and figure out which line we're going to use. Here's direction step number 12. It's that tack down line that went over and across the zipper. You can see it here, here, and here. It's fairly easy to find once you know what you're looking for. So you've got your fabric with the fold. Here's the folded edge. Let's see, bottom, up, top. There. Yep, that's what it says. Okay, lining it up with that line. It's almost right where you cut your stabilizer. Remember how we had to cut inside of that line to expose the zipper? So it's right. It's that stitch line that's right there. I'm going to place that like that. I need to make sure I center it horizontally. Let's move it over a little bit. Nice and centered. It shows taping on each side. I've got some tape right here. Let's go ahead and tape each side. And then we're going to put this back on our machine and we're going to stitch the lining front top tack down line is what they're calling it. So make sure that's taped really well. It says to tape all 4 corners, so I just used a piece of tape that's big enough to cover the 4 corners. We're going to flip to the front and it's going to stitch a line right up here and tack that down. Let's take this off our machine. You've got your hoop. You want to flip it to the back. It says you can remove the tape. I'll go ahead and take that off. And then we need to get our lining front fabric. That's the other piece of fabric that we folded over and pressed. We're going to place it right side up with the folded edge aligned with the bottom edge of the tack down line. So pretty much just what we just did, but the bottom line here, line that up, and it shows long pieces of tape. I may need to get up and grab some tape. All I have are these short little pieces here. Make sure all four corners are taped in place. They do show a big long piece of tape here and here. That might be better. It's secure. I'm going to flip it to the front. We're going to stitch the lining front tack down line. Once that's stitched out, we do need to take this and head over to the table. Going to turn our hoop to the back, remove the tape. This is the part of the project where you need thumbtacks. I have a couple of pins, the So Timeless Bella Box pin and the Feeling Festive Bella Box pin. If you don't have thumbtacks, if you have a lapel pin, that should work. It says to place the thumbtack exactly in the corner of the bottom 2 registration marks stitched in direction. Step 5, pull back the fabric corners if needed. Place tape over each thumbtack head to hold it in place. So right now you can't see the registration mark, it's covered. You need to pull the fabric up, just right down here. Here's the registration line, here and here. So the corner is right there, and the corner for this one is right there. This is going to fit. Let me start with the bear. I think I need to use the bear over here. We're going to go ahead. Don't poke the bear. Did you ever hear that saying? I'm going to poke the bear. We're going to poke a hole, and I can see it's coming right through on the registration mark on the other side. I'm going to grab a piece of tape. Now we're going to tape the bear. Just want to hold that in place for a little bit. And then we'll grab our other one. There's slightly more room here than here, and this pin is a little bit bigger. I'm going to put that through this registration mark right there. I'm going to check the front, that looks good. And grab a piece of tape and tape that into place. And then we're going to turn this over to the front. I'm going to go ahead and hold these just in case. They're a little bit heavier than a thumbtack. Place it on a firm surface. Done. The thumbtacks should be poking up, shown in red. They're right there. You can see them. Now, the fabric's kind of in the way. There. Now you can see the thumbtack. Okay, there and there. We need to get our pocket, this piece right here. You've got registration marks for the pocket. I'm going to grab my marker. Here's the corner for that one. You can see I trimmed away the excess stabilizer. I did that off camera. And here's the corner for that one. We're using the pins to line everything up. We want to slide these onto the pin. There's one, and there's the second part. We want to get a piece of tape and tape here and down here. Once you have everything taped, we're going to pull out the pins. And then I'm actually going to just do this because I know we're going to be putting this back on the machine and I don't want that catching on anything. I want to keep it out of the way. We're going to flip it to the front, go back to the machine, and we're going to stitch the button flap placement line. That's going to be up here at the top. Back at the machine, double check if you use thumbtacks. You don't want your tacks here. Make sure you've removed your thumbtacks. Let's go ahead and remove our tape and go on to the next step. We want to stitch out the button flap placement line, and this is still in that blue-gray color. We've got our button flap. It says to fold it in half lengthwise, right sides together to find the center line. So you're just going to fold it like that. We need to find the center right here. So we're just going to finger press it so I know where the center is. We're going to place the button flap with the raw edge extending 1/4 inch past the placement line that we just stitched. There's a little tiny tick mark. We're going to line up the center fold with that tick mark. I can see the tick mark right there. It is a little bit hard to see. I'm going to grab a pin and I'll just mark it with a pin. I'm going to just stick that pin right there. That's where the tick mark is. Unfold, and I can see my halfway point there. We want to line it up and go 1/4 of an inch past. I'm going to turn it towards me, line it up, and then 1/4 of an inch past. I'm going to pull that out. That was just to help me find the center. And we need to add a piece of tape across the top. It's going to look like that. And you can see this does have the quilted side up. It does say to tape it with the quilted side up. Now it says to move the zipper pull to the center of the zipper, taping the pull toward the bottom of the bag. If you look at the picture in the instructions, they've got the zipper pull right there under the button flap. Make sure that's taped into place. Flipping that back down. We're going to put this back on the machine. It says to slow down the machine, raise the presser foot to 3 millimeters or higher, and stitch the button flap tack down. We're going to tack this down. You've got a lot of bulk here. This is making this stand up even more. I'm actually going to move it, and I'll move it back in a minute. Now it's nice and flat. See? I'm going to stitch the tack down, and then I can move the zipper pull back over. I'm going to slow it down right there at the beginning. Slide that underneath the presser foot. I'm going to slow it down in case it turns around and goes back. Slow it down again. We're going to be taking this off our machine, and before I forget, I'm going to move this because I don't want it where it is right now. It'll get stitched over. Put this back in the center, and then I'll tape it back down. We need to flip our hoop to the back, and we're going to be placing thumbtacks in the 4 corners. Again, it says where the registration mark is. You're probably not going to be able to see it. I'm going to peel back the fabric and go ahead and mark these. Take this tape off and mark. They're already marked from last time. I'm going to trim away the extra fabric here so I can see it. Now we need 4 thumbtacks or 4 pins. I only have these 2 pins in my room. I had to go into my jewelry box where I have all my old jewelry. I used to love jewelry when I was younger. I managed to find 2 more pins. Are you ready? You gotta leave me a comment if you know these guys. Pinky and the Brain. Nice flat lapel pins. They'll work just fine. We're going to use these today. We need to go ahead and poke our pins through all the corners and then tape them in place. He's mad because I'm interrupting his plans to take over the world, and he'd rather be singing about cheese. I hope you get those jokes. Let's go ahead and poke these through all the corners and tape them in place. This is by far the best part of this project. It's just too funny. You've got your 4 thumbtacks or your pins in place. We're going to flip it around to the front. It says to place it on a firm surface. Done. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Be sure the zipper pull is in the center. We moved it back, remember? We need to tape the D-rings toward the bottom of the bag, stitched in part 2. Align the top and bottom registration mark corners of the bag back with the thumbtack tips. I have to keep this facing toward me. You'll have this facing top and bottom. Here's what they're talking about. It wants us to tape the D-rings toward the bottom of the bag back. We need to keep them out of the way so we don't run over them with our presser foot. So tape these down really well. We're going to align the top and the bottom registration mark corners of the bag back with the thumbtack tips. Push the bag back, this is our bag back, right side down. So make sure these are taped into place. Flip it over, and you need to find your registration marks. So the corners, that one's kind of easy to see. There's a big knot of thread there, and right there. And then we're going to push those onto the thumbtacks. We need to line everything up, and then we're going to tape everything into place. Something I'm noticing as I'm working with this, I'm double checking the lines of the stitching and everything, and I'm lining up to make sure the stitch lines match as I'm laying this down. So right there, my stitching lines match. When I go to pop it on the thumbtack, it's not right at the registration mark. You may run into the same issue. I'm more concerned with, do my stitching lines seem to match? Once you've got all 4 of those poked through, it says to tape the bag back in place. Be sure the fabric corners on the back lay flat and remove your thumbtacks. If you've got any really loose fabric on the back, you can tape it. This is all going to stay. I'm not worried about that. We're going to take this back over to the machine and we're going to stitch the bag back tack down line. Keep my hand here, slow it down if I think it's necessary. We're going to take this back over to the table. It says we can remove the tape. I'm saving all this tape to use again. I'm taping it to my tripod. You can, stick it on the side of a table or stick it somewhere. I don't want to waste all this tape. Next, we're going to flip our hoop to the back. We need to get our lining back fabric. Here's our lining back fabric. It says to place it right side down, covering the project. Doesn't really matter. Tape the corners and sides as shown. Make sure you've covered your entire project. Grab some of that tape that I just pulled off. And remember, if you're going to press down, support your hoop from the back side. Go ahead and tape this all the way around. You don't want this to come loose when you're stitching the next step. This is all taped. We're going to flip it back over, head over to the machine, and it's going to stitch out the final outline. It's going to leave an opening on the side because we're going to have to flip it right side out. Again, keep an eye on it. There's a lot of bulk going on with this project. Let's go ahead and stitch that final outline. We're done at the machine. Let's take this over to the table and finish our project. I want to get my tape off. We're going to take it out of the hoop, but some of my tape is actually taped to the hoop. So take off any tape that you have, and then we're going to get this out of the hoop. Remember the corners that were too short? Right here. It ended up not mattering at all. Do you see that? They're all outside of this final tack down. Let's take this out of the hoop. Once you have it out of the hoop, it says to trim all layers, including the zipper, a generous 1/4 inch away from the final outline. We're going to flip it right side out through the opening in the lining. There's a lot of bulk. We're going to fold everything in and close up the lining. So we're going to fold that in. That's why I left the extra. I'm going to fold it like that. You can fold it right on that stitch line. You can take it to your iron too and give it a press. I probably will before I stitch it closed. I went ahead and I pressed that. I added clips too. You want something to hold this into place. Now I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and stitch as close to the edge as I can with, I've got about a 2.0 stitch length on my machine, and I'll go back and forth and stitch and go back and forth. You can hand stitch it closed. I just don't like to hand stitch. No problem here. Went fine all the way up. Not very straight, but that's okay. When I got here at the top, this part is actually not tacked down. I broke a needle. I think my sewing machine needle is inside. There's a ton of bulk right here. You may have to hand stitch this little bit closed. You need to flip this right side out. Really bulky up here up top. We're going to take this to the iron and we need to press it. I want to zip this closed. I need to figure out where the top is and how to press. Okay, so if you're doing the small one, it's going to look like this. You're just going to see the little strip of blue here. You're going to press your bag. This is obviously the part that I stitched on my sewing machine. You see how it's got a little bit of a curve, it's not straight. This side is nice and straight. If that's going to bother you, hand stitch, you'll probably have a better result. After you press it, you're going to bring the button flap down, and it tells you to use that as a guide as to where to place your button. So when I bring the button flap down, it lands about there. Let me press this and then we'll place our button. Even after I pressed it, that's still a little curved. That's okay. When we attach our button, it says to sew it only to the outside pocket. Probably like that. Yeah. So part of my button is going to extend above, but we're just going to stitch it to the pocket. Needle threader, and I'm going to use the Glide polyester thread. going to show you a little something I learned from cross stitching. I'm going to just cut off a length of thread, take one end, find the other end. I probably cut off way too much thread, that's okay. We're going to put both ends through our needle. Let's grab the needle, how I just poked myself. See, that's why I do not like hand stitching. Put both ends of the thread through the needle threader. We want to get both of those through the eye of the needle. So both of those, like that. Pull that through. So you've got your two loose ends, and then you have a loop on the end. I'm going to hold that. You only want to stitch through the pocket lining, not the purse. I'm going to go through the back, try and come up through the buttonhole. I've got my needle coming up through the button. I'm going to pull that through. Don't pull it through all the way. Make sure I set it where I want it. I'm going to go back down through, like that. I'm going to find the loop. This is what they call a loop start in cross stitch. You won't have to tie a knot if you do this, and you've doubled your thread, so it'll make your button more secure. Put your needle through the loop. There you go. Button is secure. I just need to go up and down a few times. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. I went up and down 4 times, and since my thread's doubled, that means I've got 8 strands holding that into place. I need to tie that off. Go ahead and put that through. Yay, it works. There we go. Nice. Now we need to attach our strap. This is the full length of strap. It says to cut a 17-inch piece. That will be the short strap. So let's look at this. Yeah, there's a lot of strap in here. So you want to cut a 17-inch piece. It says to fold one raw edge of the short strap over 1 inch. Thread the folded short strap end through one lobster clasp. This is a lobster clasp. Here's your folded end. You're bringing it through the lobster clasp like that. Fold it over the post approximately 1.5 inches so the raw edge is tucked inside the fold to clip into place. So here's your 1 inch. That's about 1.5. You're hiding the raw edge. See the raw edge right there in the center? I'm hiding the raw edge, and it says to clip that into place. You can measure that if you want. I'm eyeballing it just in case. We'll put a clip on each side. It says to use a sewing machine and create a box stitch. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and I have a beige thread on it already, and I'll show you what that looks like. Here's my kind of sort of box stitch. I just stitched the box, and then I went back and stitched one line, went over and stitched the other line. This is really nice because if you've got a beige thread, you don't have to worry about it looking good. Here's the edge we just stitched. It says to fold the other raw edge of the short strap over 1 inch. Be sure both short strap ends fold to the same side. Here's the back side. So I want to make sure that the back side is the back side, that you don't get twisted and have one going one direction and one going the other direction. So we're going to fold that over 1 inch. It says to thread the folded short strap end through the ladder buckle. This is your ladder buckle. And fold it over the post approximately 1.5 inches, clip into place. So look at your buckle. If there's one side that's nicer than the other, mine definitely has a nicer side. It's this one. I want that to be my outside side. So, in fact, you can just put this through and then fold the edge. If you have trouble folding the edge and then getting it through, fold it over 1 inch. It says to clip into place, and we're going to sew it together. It says to do another box stitch. Here's the raw edge, and there's the edge of my buckle. You can't have the raw edge like this, then you don't have enough space here to stitch your box stitch or however you're tacking it down. And if you need to pull more through, you can pull more through. It's going to be an adjustable strap. Whatever you need to do to make it easy for you to sew. I'm going to clip that, and now I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and do the same thing. I've got that stitched down, and I stitched them both on the same side, so that's good. I didn't twist it. Once you've got that stitched down, you're going to set the short strap aside. We're going to grab the piece that's left, our longer strap, grab one edge. It's going to go through the lobster clasp. You can fold it over an inch first, or you can do that after you pull it through, fold it over an inch. Same process. Fold that down. Make sure your raw edge is on the inside, like that. Clip it, take it over to your machine and stitch your box stitch, or however you want to tack it down. That's all stitched out. Go ahead and get both of your straps and get your bag. You're going to connect the lobster straps with the D-rings on the bag. And I don't think it matters which one goes where. You can always move them. They just clip on. So there's my short strap. Here's my long strap. I'm just going to fold this flat, fold the end of the long strap over 1/4 of an inch and another 1/4 of an inch, tuck in the fold and top stitch. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is find the end. And you know what, honestly, if it gets twisted, these rotate and twist, so it doesn't really matter. It's a really long strap right now, which for me is nice because I'm tall. So out of curiosity, I have this looped around my neck right now. I'm 5'9", and this hangs down almost to my knees. This is a really, really long strap. So what you'll want to do is put the raw edge through here, up one side, down the other side, and then you can pull it and adjust it. You're going to need to put this on. If you want it as a crossbody, make sure you put it on as a crossbody. If you want it as a shoulder strap, put it on as a shoulder strap. You're going to measure before you cut off the extra, so you need to put it on. I put mine on in front of a mirror. I've got quite a bit left over. I have enough left over, like if I wanted to make a little tiny handbag or something with a little strap, so I'm going to save that strap. Now we're going to cut it, but we're going to want to fold to make sure that we have the raw edge looking nice, and then we're going to top stitch it in place. So I'm just going to fold it like this and eyeball it, and I'm going to cut my strap. And it says 1/4 inch, then another 1/4 inch. This is going to be hard to fold 1/4 of an inch. I'm just going to fold it. It's probably closer to 1/2 of an inch. Doesn't matter. And we're double folding to make sure that that's nice and tucked in. I'm going to go tack that down. I went back and forth and back and forth. This slipped out a little bit, but now it's not going anywhere. It's not going to pull out. That part of the strap is done. That's the last step. I was turning the page for another step. We're actually finished. Let's get a good look at this. I made the 5x7 size. Very cute. Got our button over our pocket here, so you can put something in the pocket. You don't have to have it in the zipper part. You've got a nice pocket. It's quilted on the inside because we quilted this piece. Really cute. Let's open the top before I close that. Look at the inside. I don't see any holes in the lining. That's a plus. Hey, no need for the glue gun with this one. One thing I wanted to try was to see if I'd be able to fit glasses. So here's my readers. Will they fit? They do fit. Look at that. You can fit a pair of glasses inside. I thought it was too short, but easily. I've got a little bit of extra room in there. You can do that. I don't think you could fit a rotary cutter. No, you can't pack your rotary cutter in this. It'll fit a pen, just to give you an idea of the size. You can fit a regular pen in there. And again, this is the 5x7 size. This is the smaller size. Let's look at the back. Really nice quilting detail. If you have any, stray threads, you want to go ahead and trim those off. You've got your nice tabs here with the D-rings and the lobster clasps. This is really nice hardware. If they're a little crooked, you're never going to know. Nice zipper pull. This came out great. It is super cute. I can't wait to use it. It's perfect for if you're going for a dog walk, or maybe you just need to run to the store and grab some milk or something and throw in a credit card and keys. You're ready to go. Really cute. I hope you've enjoyed making the Vicki's Essentials bag. This is Hoop Studio kit for February 2026. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if you made this. Did you make the bigger bag? Did you make the smaller bag? Did you run into any issues? I'd love to know. I've got a lot of Kimberbell coming your way. I have a huge list of things that's going to be coming over the next few weeks, including the first home sewn tiling scene, the Forest Friends soft book, the next Perfectly Pieced is going to be coming out, and I'll be doing 2 of those videos. I do one for the mystery quilt and one for the project, and I have a great idea for the project this month. You are not going to want to miss that. You don't want to miss anything. Lots of good stuff. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Like is hitting the little thumbs up that lets YouTube know that you enjoyed my content. If you have any questions, please leave them in the box below, and if after watching this you're thinking of signing up for Hoop Studio, please consider using my link below. Thank you so much for making this project with me. I'll see you next time.